In the heart of Asia, where there are no cities and no walls, only wind and dust, tribes emerged that knew no mercy. They lived on wars and raids, leaving behind nothing but the ashes of tents and the screams of the defeated.
As for you, before we begin this deep and calm journey, leave your mark on our channel by hitting the subscribe and like buttons so you can easily find our content next time. And now, take a deep breath, close your eyes, lie down, and let sleep creep in.
From there, a man named Temujin appeared, the son of a chieftain killed by poison, and a child cast into hunger, exile, and betrayal. He carried no crown and owned no palaces, but he carried something no one before him had carried, a hatred that does not rest and an ambition that swallows the earth. At the beginning of the 13th century, the tribes united under his banner. His army was not the largest, but it was the fiercest. His military system was based on absolute obedience and killing without hesitation. There was no place for weakness and no room for pity. When his march began, the goal was not just victory, but total annihilation. His armies swept through China, toppling dynasties and burning cities hundreds of years old. Then they turned west. The Shah of Khwarezm did not understand the message when he killed Genghis Khan's ambassadors, so the reply came to him in a language he could not bear to hear. The cities of Khwarezm burned one after another: Nishapur, Merv, Bukhara, Samarkand, names that were never spoken the same way again. In every city, the Mongols left a single signature: mass graves. They would sever heads, gather them into hills, and leave them at the gates of cities as a cold announcement. We passed through here. Their war was not traditional. They fabricated panic, sent spies, and built a reputation of terror before their horses even arrived. Some cities surrendered just by hearing their stories. Then came the date with Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, the center of science and thought. In 1258, Hulagu entered it. He left no book, spared no elder, and respected the sanctity of neither mosque nor library. Ink mixed with blood, and the books of the House of Wisdom drowned in the Tigris River. The caliphate fell, and one of the greatest beacons of Islamic civilization was extinguished. But the Mongols were not immortal. At Ain Jalut, for the first time, their advance stopped. The Mamluk army broke their power. After that, the retreat began. The empire disintegrated, the Khanates were divided, and the descendants of Genghis melted into the peoples of the earth. Some accepted Islam, and some became patrons of the arts. But their bloody trace was not erased. This is the story of the Mongols that we will tell today. In the year 1162, a child was born in the heart of the Mongolian steppes. No palace, no bed, no name awaited him, only a tent of worn cloth and a mother shivering under the cold of the night. The child was Temujin, who would later be known as Genghis Khan. His father, Yesugei, was the leader of a small tribe. He was not a king, but he was a fighter to be reckoned with. A few years after Temujin's birth, he was killed by poison at the hands of the Tatars, a quick death, but its results were slow and cruel. After his death, the tribe abandoned his widow and her children. They were no longer the family of a leader, but a burden to be thrown into the wilderness. Temujin and his family were cast out into the open. No food, no protection, no men, only a mother trying to gather bones and plants to feed her children. Hunger was the master of the place, and amidst this savagery, features of cruelty appeared in the boy. At a young age, he killed his half-brother over a dispute about food. No one judged him, and no one objected to him. The logic of survival was clear: either kill or starve to death. Temujin grew up moving from one tent to another, looking for allies, for a weapon, for a tribe to grant him a place among its fighters. But no one trusted an outcast boy. He was subjected to capture, imprisonment, and escape. Once, he was chained by his neck with a wooden collar and remained a prisoner in a hut for weeks. His patience was not nobility, but waiting for the opportunity. And when it came, he struck his guard and fled at night. He left no trace, left no promise of revenge. He simply disappeared. He began to gather around him men without a tribe, fighters expelled by their families, criminals looking for a chance, and slaves who had nothing to lose. Loyalty did not bring them together, but the fear of returning to hunger. Temujin promised them spoils, not dignity. He reshaped tribal concepts. Lineage was no longer important, nor origin, nor family affiliation. Loyalty was to him alone, and whoever disobeyed was killed. He watched closely. Whoever slacked in fighting was executed. Whoever stole from his comrade was punished in front of everyone, and whoever was sincere in his service rose high, whatever his origin. With this cruelty, he forged an iron loyalty. He fought his first battles against the Taichiud tribe. Their number exceeded his men, but they did not expect the new organization. Temujin did not attack directly. Instead, he sent a small band to fabricate panic inside the camp, then attacked at night from the side where no one was watching. Within hours, the battle turned into a massacre. He did not leave a single wounded man alive. After the victory, he gave no speech, did not smile, did not celebrate. He only ordered the collection of spoils and their equal division. This first victory was the beginning. Small tribes flocked to him. Some joined out of fear, and some out of greed. He continued to unite the Mongols, but on his terms. Whoever refused was killed. Whoever hesitated was eliminated. He was not the traditional leader who negotiated. He was final and decisive, not open to discussion. In the year 1206, he gathered the leaders of the Mongol tribes in what is known as the Kurultai Council. It was not a democratic meeting. Everyone knew the result was a foregone conclusion. Temujin was declared Supreme Khan and was granted the title Genghis Khan, meaning the ruler of all that is under the sky. On this day, the attendees were not witnesses to an oath of allegiance, but witnesses to the beginning of an era that shows no mercy, does not retreat, does not hesitate. Genghis Khan rebuilt the Mongol system entirely. He left nothing to chance. He divided the army into decimal units, every 10 under the command of 1, every 100 under the command of 10. Orders were transmitted quickly, and punishments were immediate. There was no place for retreat on the battlefield. Whoever fled was killed by his comrades. He sent spies to neighboring kingdoms. He was not just collecting information but spreading fear. Horrifying stories told about the Mongols, some of which were not true, but he allowed them to spread. He knew that terror alone brings down cities. He possessed a fast postal network through which messages were transported across the empire. A message would arrive from China to Mongolia in days. Whoever intercepted the mail was hanged immediately. This speed gave Genghis Khan the ability to control without being present everywhere, and he did not forget. Whoever betrayed him in the past, even if years ago, was held accountable. Whoever mocked him as a child was killed. His memory was a map of blood. But despite his severity, he was not stupid. He chose leaders carefully, monitoring their performance in battles, not according to their lineage. He gave his sons important positions, but he did not tolerate their negligence. He sent them to the fronts, not to the palaces. Thus began the march of the Mongols, from the steppes of Mongolia to the wall of China, to the rivers of Central Asia. The soldiers marched in silence. No songs, no slogans, only the beat of hooves on the dirt and the echo of death preceding them. They used to say, "If you hear that the Mongols are coming, flee or surrender or dig your graves." After the tribes were united under the banner of Genghis Khan, there was no longer anyone in the steppes to threaten him. The interior submitted, and the army was ready. But he did not want stability, but expansion. The Mongols were not a people who lived in castles, but a continuous march, and every land he did not rule was an enemy that must be crushed. At that time, the Khwarezmian Empire controlled a vast area of Transoxiana, extending from Iran to Central Asia. Its ruler, Muhammad II of Khwarezm, saw himself as an unbreakable power, and he was on the verge of committing a mistake history would not forget. Initially, Genghis did not seek war. He sent a caravan of 100 merchants to Khwarezm loaded with goods in an attempt to open trade relations. But the governor of the city of Otrar, one of the Khwarezm Shah's governors, accused them of espionage, arrested them, killed them, and confiscated the goods. When Genghis heard the news, he did not act in haste. He sent a diplomatic delegation consisting of 3 men, demanding an investigation and the surrender of the perpetrator. But the response came as a shock. One of the ambassadors was killed, and the beards of the other 2 were shaved, and they were sent back humiliated to the Mongol Khan. That was enough to ignite the storm. Genghis Khan swore before his men that he would turn the kingdoms of Khwarezm into ashes. He began preparing a military campaign, considered one of the largest organized campaigns in the 13th century. The attack was not random. The army was divided into units striking simultaneously, breaching cities from their weakest points. The plan was not just victory, but extermination. In the year 1219, the march began. The first city he faced was Otrar, the site of the first crime. The city was besieged and then stormed. Its governor was captured, bound, and handed over alive to Genghis Khan, who ordered molten silver to be poured into his eyes and ears as a penalty for his treachery. Afterward, he headed to Bukhara, the city of golden domes. The city resisted, but it did not hold out. When the Mongols entered it, they did not distinguish between a fighter and a civilian. The great mosque was turned into a stable for horses, women were taken captive, children were slaughtered, and houses were burned. Genghis himself went out to speak in the city square, saying, "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." Then came Samarkand, one of the most beautiful Muslim cities. It was fortified with thick walls and inhabited by thousands of fighters, but betrayal from within facilitated the fall. The gates were opened and the Mongols entered as a knife enters the neck. The massacre continued for days. It is said that the city was completely emptied of its inhabitants. Artisans were deported to Mongolia, and the rest were killed or their necks were sold. Afterward, the army marched toward Nishapur. The city fought fiercely in the battle. One of Genghis Khan's sons was killed. The response was not only military, but vengeful. After the fall of the city, an order was issued to execute all its inhabitants, men, women, and children. No one was spared. Heads were collected in hills, and corpses filled the streets until even dogs and cats were killed. As for Merv, the scientific city, it witnessed one of the most heinous massacres. The Mongols entered it without significant resistance, but they showed no mercy. The inhabitants were gathered in squares and killed en masse. The death toll is estimated at hundreds of thousands. Blood did not dry from the ground for days. Those cities were not weak cities, but they did not know their enemy. The Mongols were not just an army, but a machine of destruction driven by hatred and iron discipline. There were no prisoners and no negotiation. Whoever opened the doors was slaughtered, whoever fought was exterminated, and whoever fled was hunted down to the last point. As for Muhammad II of Khwarazm, he did not fight. He fled from one city to another, never facing the Mongols in a single battle. He kept moving until he reached a remote island in the Caspian Sea, where he died there alone, chased and broken. After his death, his children continued to flee. The Khwarezmian state no longer had a factual existence. Its cities turned into rubble, its people into ash, and its land into an echo of unending terror. That campaign was the first direct bloody contact between the Mongols and the Islamic world, leaving a deep scar that did not heal. Scholars fled, mosques were burned, schools were closed, and markets were leveled to the ground. Genghis Khan did not celebrate the victory. He considered it a natural entitlement. After destroying Khwarezm, he returned to Mongolia to plan his next step. There was no regret and no retreat, only new land waiting to be burned. The cities that were looted were not rebuilt as they were, and the names that people spoke were never spoken with the same tranquility again. The Mongols were not just invaders, but a machine for breaking civilizations. This was not a battle, but an earthquake that started from the east and turned entire kingdoms into ashes. In the year 1227, after more than 20 years of invasion, destruction and massacres, Genghis Khan's heart stopped. But his death was not an end, but a beginning of a new era, more organized and more expansive. The Mongols did not weaken with his death, but branched out and turned into an unstoppable entity. In his final years, Genghis was launching campaigns against northern China, crushing Chinese cities one after another and pushing Eastern empires toward collapse. During that campaign, he sustained mysterious injuries. Accounts conflicted. It was said he fell from his horse. It was said he was killed secretly by a Chinese princess while raping her, and it was said he fell ill and his health deteriorated suddenly. But what is certain is that his death was sudden, and the news of his death was not announced immediately. The secrecy was absolute. His corpse was transported across thousands of kilometers in a funeral procession surrounded by armed battalions. Everyone who encountered the procession on its way was killed. Everyone who saw the grave was killed. It is said that his soldiers destroyed an entire forest to hide his burial site, and that the river changed its course to flow over his grave. No one knows his location to this day. Genghis entered history as a storm and left it as a shadow without a shrine. After his death, the senior commanders met in the Kurultai Council to decide who would carry the empire's banner. The decision was not democratic, but foregone. His son Ögedei was the most administratively capable and the most accepted among the commanders, so he was inaugurated as the Supreme Khan of the Mongols to lead the empire in the name of the dead father. But the empire was too large to be ruled by one man, so it was divided into 4 main khanates: the Golden Horde Khanate in Russia and Eastern Europe, led by Batu, son of Jochi, grandson of Genghis; the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, led by Chagatai, Genghis's second son; the Yuan Khanate in China, which would be established later, led by Kublai Khan; and the Ilkhanate of Iran and Iraq, which would later fall under the authority of Hulagu, grandson of Genghis and son of Tolui. Ögedei Khan was a practical ruler and continued the policy of conquest. He sent campaigns toward Korea, east of China and Europe, but his administrative spirit was not enough to control an empire growing without stopping. So after his death in 1241, the conflict between Genghis's heirs began to surface. In this leadership vacuum, a new name appeared, a silent young man who fought in his youth and trained at the hands of great commanders. His name was Hulagu, son of Tolui and grandson of Genghis Khan. Hulagu was not the most prominent among Genghis's grandsons, but he was the most committed to his grandfather's approach. He knew no tolerance, did not lean towards politics, and trusted no one outside his circle. He grew up in combat camps, and his name was always linked to bloody campaigns. In the year 1251, Mongol Khan, Hulagu's brother, assumed the position of Supreme Khan. His first decision was to send Hulagu to the west of the empire to expand Mongol influence in Muslim lands. The declared goal: to destroy who remained of the independent Islamic states, foremost among them the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad. Preparation began immediately. Hulagu received clear orders: crush everyone standing in his way, including the Ismaili assassins, the Seljuks, and the Caliphate. Huge armies were mobilized, the likes of which the East had never seen before. Are you ready to hear what Hulagu did to Baghdad? In the year 1127, and after more than 20 years of invasion and destruction and massacres, the heart of Genghis Khan stopped. But his death was not an end, but a beginning of a new era, more organized and extended. The Mongols did not weaken by his death, but branched out and turned into an entity that does not stop. In his last years, Genghis was launching campaigns on northern China, crushing Chinese cities one after another, and pushing eastern empires towards collapse. During that campaign, he was inflicted with mysterious wounds, and accounts conflicted about his death. It was said he fell from his horse, and it was said he was killed secretly by the hand of a Chinese princess during her rape, and it was said he fell ill and his health deteriorated suddenly. But the certain thing is that his death was sudden, and that the news of his death was not announced immediately. The secrecy was absolute. His corpse was transported across thousands of kilometers in a funeral procession surrounded by armed battalions. Everyone who encountered the procession on its way was killed, and everyone who saw the grave was killed. It is said that his soldiers destroyed a whole forest to hide the site of his burial, and that the river changed its course to pass over his grave. No one knows his place until today. Genghis entered history like a storm, and exited it like a shadow without a shrine. After his death, the senior commanders met in the Kurultai Council to decide who would carry the banner of the empire. The decision was not democratic, but was settled. His son Ogedei was the most capable administratively and the most accepted among the commanders, so he was installed as Great Khan of the Mongols to lead the empire in the name of the dead father. But the empire was too large to be ruled by one man, so it was divided into 4 main khanates: the Khanate of the Golden Horde in Russia and Eastern Europe, led by Batu, son of Jochi, grandson of Genghis; the Khanate of Chagatai in Central Asia, led by Chagatai, the second son of Genghis; the Khanate of Yuan in China, which will arise later, led by Kublai Khan; the Khanate of Iran and Iraq, which will fall later under the authority of Hulagu, grandson of Genghis and son of Tolui. Ogedei Khan was a practical ruler. He continued the policy of invasion and sent campaigns towards Korea, east of China and Europe, but his administrative spirit was not enough to control an empire growing without stopping. For after his death in 1241, the conflict between Genghis's heirs began to appear to the public. In this leadership vacuum, a new name appeared, a silent young man who fought in his youth and trained at the hands of great commanders. His name is Hulagu, son of Tolui and grandson of Genghis Khan. Hulagu was not the most prominent among Genghis's grandsons, but he was the most committed to his grandfather's approach. He does not know tolerance, does not incline to politics, and does not trust anyone outside his circle. He grew up in fighting camps, and his name was always linked to bloody campaigns. In the year 1251, Mongol Khan, Hulagu's brother, assumed the position of Great Khan, and his first decision was sending Hulagu to the west of the empire to expand Mongol influence in Muslim lands. The declared goal was destroying whoever remained of independent Islamic states, and at their head, the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad. Preparation began immediately. Hulagu received clear orders to crush everyone who stands in his way, including the Ismaili assassins, the Seljuks, and the Caliphate. Huge armies were mobilized that the East had not seen the like of before: archers, engineers, siege units, heavily armored knights, and spies preceding the cities by years. Even animals had a share. Hundreds of elephants from India and moving towers and huge catapults that do not know mercy. Hulagu began by sending threatening letters to Muslim princes on his way. Some surrendered voluntarily, some betrayed their neighbors and cooperated with him, and some, and at their head the Caliph in Baghdad, ignored the threat, thinking that the Mongols would not dare to attack the capital of the Caliphate. But Hulagu was not negotiating. He was moving as if executing his grandfather's commandment. Who insults us is erased from existence. Before Baghdad, Hulagu began destroying Ismaili castles one after another. This sect was known for mystery and political assassinations, but it did not withstand before the armies of the Mongols. Their fortified castles fell, and their leader surrendered himself alive. The sect vanished from political history within months. After that, the march towards Iraq began. The Abbasid Caliphate, which was a symbol of Islam for centuries, became the next target. Mongol soldiers were advancing slowly, but without stopping. The cities that object are crushed, and that remain silent are looted, and that make truce are used as bridges towards Baghdad. Hulagu did not send appeasement letters. He was sending final ultimatums. By the end of 1257, all roads leading to Baghdad were under his control. Caliph al-Mustasim remained in his palace, not preparing, not negotiating, and not mobilizing, thinking that history would protect him. But the Mongols do not recognize anyone's history. And at the beginning of the year 1258, the siege began. A siege that will burn what remains of the Caliphate's glory. In a gloomy dawn of the year 1258 AD, the shadow of the Mongols extended over the walls of Baghdad. The city was in a slumber, not knowing that the end is approaching. The Abbasid Caliphate, which spread its authority over centuries of glory and science and civilization, became besieged by armies that do not know mercy. Hulagu, grandson of Genghis, arrived at the gates of Baghdad in an army said to have exceeded 200,000 soldiers, carrying iron and fire, and dragging with them catapults that bring down palaces as they bring down huts, and with them traitors from inside the nation who betrayed their religion and guided to the weak points in the city. Caliph al-Mustasim sent distress letters, but no one answered. Cities fell around him, and Muslim princes dispersed between hesitant and afraid and traitor, and the siege began. Weeks of terror shells poured on Baghdad as if the sky had been pierced. The walls collapsed and the mosques trembled, and the nights turned into a silent hell interrupted by the neighing of horses and the sound of collapses. And when the Mongols entered the city, time stopped. Everyone who was in their path was slaughtered. Elders, women, children, jurists, readers, scholars, and school students. The library of House of Wisdom was not spared, nor the hospitals of medicine, nor the domes of science. Books of scholars were thrown into the Tigris until its water blackened from ink, and it was said that the Euphrates carried the smell of blood for days. In the heart of the city, Caliph al-Mustasim was lured to Hulagu's tent. He was not killed directly, for they had a superstition that spilling the caliph's blood would bring the curse upon them. So they wrapped him in rugs and trampled him until he parted with life. And thus died the last Abbasid caliph in Baghdad, without a real fight and without the world hearing his last scream. Mosques were burned and houses were demolished, and the silence of death camped over Baghdad. In numbered days, the capital of Islam disappeared. Nothing remained but ruins and muffled weeping in the chests of who survived, and dispersion that extended from the Levant to Egypt. But the nation did not die. In the East, scholars were copying what remained of books, and in the West, the Mamluk armies were preparing to confront this flood. Baghdad fell, yes, but the spirit of Islam was not broken, and this was the beginning of the end for the Mongols, and the beginning of a new rise for Muslims. After Baghdad fell in the year 658 AH, the Mongol march did not stop, but they expanded west towards the Levant, carrying the same fires that burned the capital of the caliphate, and led by the same hatred for everything that is Islamic. They entered Aleppo by the sword, then swept Homs, then Damascus. No one fought them, because who remained in the Levant was defenseless, terrified, or complicit. People fled in the night without shelter, and scholars carried their books and headed south towards Cairo. The scene was bitter. Homeless families, closed mosques, killed imams, and the Christian minorities, and especially the Armenians and local Christians, had cooperated with the Mongols, opened the doors for them, and contributed to establishing their new authority, hoping for religious or political gains. The matter was not a secret, but was a documented reality they conveyed in their letters and alliances, while swords were tearing the Muslims apart. Preparations began. Qutuz issued a general call for jihad and began equipping the army from Cairo. He sent to the refugee princes of the Levant, so Baibars came to him, the brave Mamluk commander, and with him knights who do not know fear. The army gathered in Gaza, then moved north towards Palestine, towards the land in which the fate of the nation will be decided. In a meadow between Bizan and Nablus, named Ain Jalut, the two gatherings met. The Mongols were led by Kitbuka, one of Hulagu's senior generals, a cruel man who does not know mercy. And Qutuz and Baibars knew that victory here would change the face of history. Qutuz gave a speech to his army. The battle broke out. Baibars began with a surprise attack, advanced, then retreated pretending to withdraw, so the Mongols chased him, so the Muslim army encircled them. The plan was tight. The Mongols were forced to fight in a narrow space in which they lost the advantage of fast movement. Qutuz was in the rear, watching the course of the battle, but as soon as he saw the disturbance, he jumped into the field himself. He raised the banner of Islam with his hand and fought until his helmet almost fell from his head. Kitbuka was killed, and his banner fell. The soldiers collapsed after him and retreated in utter chaos, leaving behind them the weapons and corpses. That was the first real victory for Muslims since years of brokenness. The first time Mongol armies are defeated in a direct battle. With this victory, the wave of crawling that began from the plains of Mongolia and which swallowed the cities of Central Asia and Persia and Iraq and the Levant stopped. Defeated for the first time, and retreated for the first time, and shaken for the first time. Ain Jalut was more than just a battle. It was a declaration that the nation, even if it fell, it does not die, that swords alone are not enough to break the doctrine, and that the power of faith overcomes iron. Qutuz entered Damascus as a liberator, then returned to Cairo, so people received him with weeping and takbir. But treachery was awaiting him, so he was assassinated on the way back, and the man who saved the nation disappeared. Despite that, Ain Jalut was not an end, but a beginning, for Muslims regained their confidence, and the Mamluks began rising as a protecting force for Islam. They ruled the Levant and Egypt, and repelled the Crusaders, and built mosques, and restored to scholars their status. From the midst of the wreckage a renaissance rose, and from the wounds of Baghdad and the blood of the Levant, a new power emerged that learned from history and carried a pure sword that is not sold and does not break. Thus ended the acts of terror, not by the extinguishing of the Mongol fire only, but by the return of the flame of life in the hearts of Muslims. From among the ashes a nation rose, and from among the blood new banners emerged. Minarets returned chanting, and scholars returned teaching, and markets filled with people's voices after being a shelter for ruin. And this victory was not just a military battle, but was a victory for the spirit, for culture, and for identity. But history does not rest for long, for while the nation was catching its breath, there was in the horizon another shadow, more cunning, more savage, coming from the heart of Khorasan. His name is Tamerlane. So do not close the book yet, for its pages are still dripping with pain and narrating lessons that are not forgotten. And if you found in this journey what is worthy, do not forget to support us with a like and subscription, so you stay with us in every step of the sleeping tales of history.